perhaps having read the book or seen the movie. But today you'll see on Austin Faith Dialogue the making of a religious quilt. Stay with us.
This is Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs program discussing the important crossroad of religion in life, produced by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues throughout our area. Now, today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson of the Austin Metropolitan Ministries, welcoming you to this edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. You've heard that the making of an American quilt has generated new interest in this art form in the nation, but for generations there has been quilting bee as a symbol of religious interests. And more recently there is a new movement in this regard, which is evident here in the capital city of Texas and throughout the nation. And to help us appreciate that is our guest today, Marcia Kalecki of the Austin Area Quilt Guild.
It's nice to be here.
Marcia, it's great to have you.
Thank you.
And we're particularly pleased to have had you bring some of the work that's been done by folks here in local congregations. And how long have you been involved in this?
I've been a quilter 4 years, and 4 years only. We do not have a quilting tradition in my family, and so I am the first to quilt in my family. Mm-hmm. And I am very pleased to be a quilter. I enjoy it very much, and it brings me a great deal of relaxation and satisfaction. And the aspect of religious quilting is even more exciting.
Okay. What led you into this particular art form?
I think I had done every other type of craft and handiwork that there was. Counted cross stitch for 15 years. I knitted, I sewed, I made clothing, I did crewel work, you name it, I did it, and it was all in preparation to become a quilter.
And you have some to show us here, and why don't you start with what you've got in your lap?
Well, I brought some quilts today that bespeak the biblical origins of quilting as done by our pioneer ancestresses as they traveled across the plains and settled our country. And the first quilt I have in my lap is an antique quilt. It's made in the 1930s, and the pattern is known as Job's Tears, or it's also known as Texas Tears. Almost every quilt pattern has at least 2 names. Some of them have as many as 5. Quilt names changed as they came across the country. When they left New England and came through the Ohio area, they changed. They changed again as they went across the plains, and they changed as our pioneer ancestors went to California. Okay.
So always evolving.
Always evolving. This seems to be a non-static art form.
And what do we have as far as what you got hanging here?
Well, this beautiful quilt that you see on the stand is known as a Jacob's Ladder quilt. And this was made right here in Austin by Erica Rogala, who is also a member of the Austin Area Quilt Guild, and it has hung in our quilt show, and is a very beautiful example of how a traditional pattern can be updated to a very modern form.
Okay.
Below, I have some more Jacob's Ladders. The small quilt on the left in the red and the brown is another variation of a Jacob's Ladder, as is the red and white quilt top and the blue and white quilt top. These are all Jacob's Ladder forms. And the pillow in the center is a Hosanna pillow, and that block is known as the Hosanna block. When our pioneer ancestresses were traveling across the plains, they had no other written source upon which to name their blocks except the Bible.
I see. Mm-hmm.
And so I have counted out of Barbara Brackman's anthology minimally 67 blocks that have biblical names or biblical inferences like Rose of Sharon, Jacob's coat, cross and crown, crown and thorns, and it goes on and on and on. And there's a huge list. And they were drawn by what they saw, not only in nature, by what gave them comfort. And what gave them comfort was their Bible.
Mm-hmm. There was a show that the Live Oak Theater did this past year.
Yes.
That was called Quilts.
The Quilters.
Or the Quilters. And
yes.
I thought that brought out very well what this meant to it wasn't just a matter of passing time.
Oh, absolutely not. Quilting bespeaks one of our very basic needs, and that is the need for cover, the need for shelter. And quilting was not a matter of pleasure or a matter of art form as it is today. quilting was a matter of necessity. You couldn't carry blankets with you. They were too heavy. You had to make them along the way, and every scrap of cloth, every scrap of thread was jealously saved and guarded. And one of the great joys that women had was when they got together, they traded scraps, and it made more interesting quilts, and it gave them a source of community.
I was just going to say, as you talk about this, it's not just an individual effort, but it's a communal effort.
Almost always a communal effort. We say quilters who quilt alone are having an out-of-body experience.
Okay.
Quilting is a group effort, and quilting is much more fun when you have other people to share your quilting with.
Okay, well, today we're not going to have an out-of-body experience.
No, there'll be no out-of-body experiences today.
All right, tell me a little bit about what's going on in Austin today as far as this religious-related quilting experience.
Oh, this has been just a wonderful area of research for me recently over the summer and into spring to discover how religious communities and churches are using quilting, and the women are using quilting in order to reach out to the community to provide basic comfort and that basic need of shelter to people all over Austin and really all over the United States. We have many churches involved.
Well, now, you shared with me before the show that there's one congregation that's been doing it for a long time, and that's the Grace
United Methodist Church in South Austin has been quilting. There has been a group quilting there for 100 years. This is amazing because Austin's not that old. So they began quilting very early on in their ministry. And how they use their quilting is a group of women take in quilts, quilt tops, to be turned into quilts, in other words, to be quilted for a fee. They then use this fee for their church and for projects that their church deems are proper.
So it's still a lively art for them.
Extremely so. They asked me to say, please, that they were not all 100 years old, nor were they the original group.
Okay. A successor group.
Yes.
And what about within the Catholic community?
Within the Catholic community, we're seeing a great upswelling of the use of quilting in small groups for purposes for the church. One of the most beautiful quilts I've seen recently is this quilt right here, this Friendship Star quilt. And it is from St. Paul's Catholic Church in South Austin. And this is called a Friendship Star, and I think that's so very appropriate. This is a gorgeous quilt, and they're raffling this quilt this year, and they're going to continue to landscape the grounds, and in particular around a statue of St. Paul at their church with the money. Up in Round Rock, St. William's Church is quilting alongside Palm Valley Lutheran Church, an example of ecumenical work, and they are using their quilts, the quilts that they make. One goes to the church raffle, and the other one goes to be raffled for a charitable organization which they select during the year. Okay,
so the fundraising aspect of quilting is part of the motivation.
Absolutely part of the motivation, but the other part of the motivation is the community. The feeling that women have when they get together, and I do not want to exclude men because there are male quilters.
I was just going to say, you talked about the pioneer ancestresses who did this, but somewhere along the line you've got men involved.
Absolutely. Although we still have less than 2% male quilters that we know of. There may be some quilting out there in secret, but I don't know. Some of them are very famous and travel internationally demonstrating their quilting techniques.
Okay.
So we do have male quilters.
Well, now, also in the Austin community, you have evidence of interest in this in the Jewish community.
Absolutely. The Jewish community has their own website, as well as do many other quilting groups and religious quilting groups. And when I contacted them, they told me about a wonderful group of women who quilted a series of Torah covers based on the days of creation in the Bible. And they are exquisite to behold. They are absolutely scenes of the days of creation, and they are among the finest examples of religious quilting that I have seen.
I see. Well, I think that this is an interfaith effort that is evident today in Austin, and
absolutely,
it looks to me like it's going to be a growing phenomenon here.
I believe it is.
We have a list of the congregations that are currently involved. Let's just roll that and see how many there are. And
this is a minute amount of groups that are involved in Austin. There is one interdenominational group that is currently using women from over 100 churches here in the Austin area.
And you say 100, at least 100 that you know of?
At least 100 that I know of, plus these churches.
Mm-hmm.
That group is Church Women United.
Yes, tell us a little bit about that.
Church Women United is an interdenominational ecumenical organization that is producing more of the comfort lap-type quilts rather than full bed-size quilts. And they have produced as many as 200 quilts a year, using the 100 churches, doing various aspects of quilting, if you will. Some churches will do the cutting, some churches will do the piecing of the tops, some churches will do the tying.
Mm-hmm.
But all together, they produce an amazing amount of quilts, and these go to places like Casa Marianella, Hobo, the Montopolis Friendship Center, the Well Baby Center, and I've probably forgotten a few other places, the Center for Battered Women since 1953.
Mm-hmm.
And they are doing a wonderful, wonderful work, as well as creating community.
Well, one of the things that I can speak of from the standpoint of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, which of course is closely connected with Church Women United as an ecumenical effort, is that there are some things that you can do together that you can't do by yourself. And there's a kind of synergy that's involved in getting people interacting in that way. And as you described what Church Women United is doing, you've got individual congregations, and yet you're implying that they know what others are doing and are cooperating in making this for common causes.
Absolutely. Quilting coming together, quilting groups coming together to create something for the greater good always produces A, superior quilt, and B, a superior feeling. And many quilters believe that quilts kind of retain the feeling of the people who are making it. Not everyone, of course, believes this. But there are...
Say that again. What does that mean?
Well, when you work on a quilt, let's face it, it's in your lap a lot, you're hugging it a lot, you're thinking a lot about the person or the people for whom the quilt is made. And there are some quilters who believe that some of that wonderful good feeling and some of those hugs, a mom will tell you she puts a lot of hugs into the quilts she makes for her children.
Oh, I see.
You know.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, it's not just a mechanical thing, but there's an emotional...
Extreme emotional
kind of bonding
attachment.
Yeah.
All quilts have names.
Okay.
All quilts are named. When they're finished, quilts are named. And the naming of a quilt takes a great deal of thought and concentration. And if you go back through history, you will see some gorgeous religiously named quilts.
You don't start out with the name and say, this is going to be the Jacob's Ladder quilt, or...
Well, it may be the Jacob's Ladder quilt, but this quilt has another name as well, and it's You've Got to Be Kidding.
Really?
Yes.
You're not kidding me. That's actually
No,
the
that's
name.
naming the quilt. You've got to be kidding.
Okay. Well, I'm learning all kinds of things today that I never associated with quilting before. We're going to be taking a break here in about a minute, but just in a few seconds, give us a very quick sense of your emotional tie to this. I can tell it's more than just an intellectual endeavor.
I was so fortunate when we discussed this project because it allowed me to combine what I feel religiously, what I feel spiritually, with another of my favorite activities, and that was quilting. You can't be dispassionate when you quilt. You cannot be a cool, calm, collected quilter because this fabric is so wonderful and it's so beautiful to look at. It's like a palette of colors.
And an expression of your faith.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I want to come back to that after we take a short break here, but you folks stay with us and we'll be back for the making of a religious quilt.
Serving Austin means serving you. That has always been the primary goal of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We are religion in action through the work of these organizations. Each plays a key role in making the capital city a better place to live, but we can't do it alone. Do you have some spare time, talents, or any resources that you can share? If you do, please call AMM at 472-7627 because serving Austin means serving you.
Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, where today we're reflecting upon the making of a religious quilt, as this is an art form that is very widespread here in Austin and also throughout the country. And Marcia K. Lakey from the Austin Area Quilt Guild, we're glad to have you now. Give us a little bit of a view. You went on the internet and you found something going on elsewhere.
You bet. Quilting is not for little old gray-haired ladies anymore. The quilting community is extremely international. There are many, many quilting groups on internet and many international and national websites where you can not only talk to quilters around the world, but you can actually view quilts that have been made on the web.
Okay.
I went to my group QuiltNet, and there are 1,430 members of QuiltNet around the world. And I said, help, 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 I'm doing a television show, what do I do, what do I say? And I had 24 responses the first day.
Oh, my word.
Yes, my email box was just flooded, and they wanted me to talk about everything from every quilt project they ever had to remember the Amish, remember the Mennonites, remember the Native Americans, remember the African-American slave quilters, remember the Jewish quilters, and remember the religious communities in Ohio and Indiana, and it was amazing.
Okay. Well, there is one out in San Diego. It sent you a little video that we're going to be taking a look at now.
Yes, Shelley Gregg in San Antonio, who is a quilt netter, San Antonio, San Diego, who is a quilt netter, sent me this wonderful videotape. This group is called Prayers and Squares, and this is a wonderful way for an entire church to send their prayers and their good wishes to a critically ill person. When a person is critically ill, a call comes forth for a quilt. And the Prayers and Square groups get together and they piece the top, they bring it to church where it is blessed by the minister at the altar, and then it is set up, and everyone can tie a tie and say a prayer for the person for whom the quilt will be sent.
Let's take a look at that now. You
can see the threading of the needle, and there she goes. She's tying off a tie. This is a tie quilt rather than a quilted quilt, which means that there's not laborious hand stitching on this quilt, and this is a very accepted form of quilting, tying quilts. And they have said the prayer and tied the tie.
Okay. I'd like to have you just share with our viewers a story that a particular individual, a child, Cody, that was written up in the newspaper article.
In the newspaper article that Shelley was kind enough to send, one of the women talked about her 4-year-old grandson, Cody, who was in a coma. And she asked for a prayer quilt for Cody. And, of course, the church responded and made a beautiful prayer quilt, and everyone tied ties. It was very heavily knotted. And they brought the quilt to Cody, and they covered him in the quilt while he was in the coma. And the parents asked the doctor, would he be allowed to have the quilt with him at all times so that he would be covered in prayer. And the doctor actually notated this in the medical records, that the quilt was to be with the boy at all times. And 3 days later, Cody came out of his coma. Cody is perfectly fine.
And he's recovered.
And he is totally recovered.
Yeah, it's a very touching story, and appreciate your sharing that with us. The extent to which people remember individuals through the quilts and offer prayers and affection through that means, I think internationally has been associated in the public's mind with the AIDS quilt.
Yes.
And what can you share with us in terms of how that works? So,
the AIDS quilt, or perhaps the best-known international quilting project currently happening, and it's been happening for a while, and it will be happening for a long time. People, groups, individuals may make a block of any size to remember, to commemorate, to love a loved one who has died of AIDS. And the quilt is massive in size. The quilt takes up an entire field when it is laid out completely. And so the quilt at times has been sectioned and moved around the country in pieces so that the quilt can be seen by lots of people, and to raise awareness for AIDS and to remember those people. It's very important not to forget.
Well, I think that one is the one symbol of this art form that has reached the public consciousness.
Very much so.
But it's not the only one, and it's of the same piece, it seems to me, as what you were describing about folks who wrap others in prayer at the same time that they may be wrapped in a blanket.
Yes, absolutely.
And Give us a little bit of a sense of how we can maybe make some connections here. I know we have a listing of the Austin area Quilt Guild number. Let's show that. And you said in addition to that there is...
Yes, we're on the web. We have Austin Area Quilt Guild has a website, and it is, of course, http://www.io.com. This is a long one. /tilde AAQG/. And all of those things are there for a reason, I'm told.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, if people want to know the website, why don't they call that number?
It's a very wise idea. You can reach the website on the number. But I also want to say that Prayers and Squares is an idea that can be brought to Austin.
Okay. Well, how would that work here?
Well, the Prayers and Squares people have been very kind in sharing with me exactly how Prayers and Squares works and what it takes to get a Prayers and Squares group started in your church or your religious community. And you can also, by asking for me at the Quilt Guild phone number, I'll be happy to return your phone call and talk to you about Prayers and Squares. It takes absolutely nothing except a little time and a lot of love.
They would ask for Marcia Kalecki at, the number again is...
if they'll roll it on the screen. It's, my mind is going blank at the moment.
Okay.
The Austin Area Quilt Guild phone number,
At
and there it is.
448-5152.
Correct.
Okay, good. Now, there is also, through this organization, a show that's coming up this fall.
Yes, our biannual Austin Area Quilt Guild show, which is a member show. It is the quilts that you will see, and there are over 375 to be exhibited, as well as almost 50 vendors, places where you can buy things, quilt-related items, quilts, wearable art, quilted jackets.
And where will it be?
It'll be at the lower level of the Palmer Auditorium, October 4th through 6th.
Okay. And so
we're very excited about it.
Yeah. Why are you excited?
The level of quilting and quiltmanship is extraordinary in the Austin area. Our Quilt Guild has over 500 members, and that is but a tiny drop of the quilters that exist in this area. Quilting is very widespread, and it's big business.
Okay. I think the other thing in listing of the various Austin religious groups, there was a Baptist group that we didn't...
Friendship International. Friendship International is a Baptist international organization, and they do outreach for their international members who come to the United States, perhaps don't know anyone in the United States, and they can take a variety of classes, including quilting. And my friend Shirley Smith is in charge of the quilting classes. And they have been doing that for many years and have other classes in writing and English as a second language, a variety of activities, but quilting is part of that, and the women are very, very excited when they attend that class.
So this is a network of quilting groups in various Baptist churches in this area?
Yes, there are 20 churches participating in the Austin area in Friendship International.
And they then tie in with the world.
That's right, with Friendship International.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, what difference does it make whether you go beyond your locality in this regard?
I don't think
to belong to an international group, just to say that you've got a presence that is more than just Austin, Texas, or...
Right. I think Friendship International really is worldwide. And it's simply an outreach organization of the Baptist Church worldwide to help their members stay in contact and stay in community with one another.
They have journals and
they
this
have
kind of thing
newsletters, journals, many, many classes, yes.
And do you do that kind of thing through the Austin Quilt Guild as well, to provide resources to local groups or individual groups?
Yes, we do. Austin Area Quilt Guild has a large community service segment that is part of our charter as a nonprofit organization. And we provide many services for the communities and for anyone who needs our help.
Okay.
Most recently, we worked with Believe in Me.
Oh,
yes.
That's the young people's
Yes, the young people's organization. They came to us with their piece quilt tops and said, help, we're running out of time, we don't know what to do. And various members of the guild, various quilting bees in the guild stepped forward, took various segments of the quilts and quilted them for the show.
Well, now, you said they had what that they needed help with?
They had the quilt tops, in other words, an unquilted quilt top. This has no batting or backing to it yet. It's not what a lot of people would say. It's not stuffed yet.
Okay.
Okay, and it doesn't have a backing material.
All right.
And they brought us something similar to this without the stuffing, without the backing. and said, we need help. We don't know how to do this part. And the Austin Area Quilt Guild stepped forward and did that part for them.
Now, tell us a little bit more about who these young people are.
The Believe in Me people are children who come from, I would say, more disadvantaged families, perhaps slightly marginalized families. Their families are not traditional families that you would think of, a mom, a dad, you know.
Sure.
And by doing their wonderful show that they do every year, the Believe in Me show, it gives them an opportunity to build self-esteem and to build a lot of things. Not to mention to build the opportunity to connect with other children and adults that can provide them with positive role models.
These are teenagers.
They actually are a little younger than teenagers in many cases. The squares that we saw in the quilts were drawn by children as young as 8.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
And then they do this wonderful show, and the quilts were hanging all around the show and all in the, where was that performed? The Performing Arts Center here in town.
Oh, yes, right.
Yeah.
They had I know that was in the spring at some point.
Yes.
Now, this is an annual kind of an event that...
Yes, it is. Believe in Me is an annual event.
That will include a quilting aspect to it.
It did this year. It may not in years to come, but it did include a quilting aspect this year, and the Austin Area Quilt Guild was very pleased to be part of it.
Well, I think that's fascinating, that it's not just, as you said earlier, just older ladies, but people of all ages.
Yes, the youngest quilter in our guild is 7 years old. And the oldest quilter that I know of in our guild is 94.
My word.
So it's quite a span.
And do they work together on quilts? I mean, the 7-year-old and the 94-year-old?
They haven't yet. Allie is still in the learning phases. Our 7-year-old is still in the learning phases, but she has produced her first miniature quilt. So we're very proud of her.
Well, and just in kind of a summary, going back to the fact that you had quilting bees as a symbol of religious quilting earlier on, but now it's broadened. It's more than just a bee. It's
more than just a bee, and when you say the phrase quilting bee, most people think of women sitting around a common quilting frame working on a single quilt. Bees have evolved from that aspect, although that aspect still occurs. Bees have evolved from that aspect to groups of women working together either on single projects, but still in community, still together, or perhaps they are working on a single project which will benefit someone else or perhaps one of the members.
Okay. Well, you've been a blessing to us today, Marcia.
Thank you.
For being here and for sharing with the general public what is happening in the way of the making of a religious quilt. Join us again next week for the making of our next Austin Faith Dialogue program. I'm Richard Thompson, bidding you peace and good day.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries.